one of the things we hear a lot is about data architecture. In the context of that, right, in the modern day telco organization, right? What do we mean when we say data architecture? Maybe Rakesh, would you like to start with that one?
I think all of us are probably very familiar with what data architecture means, but just to summarize and set the context for this panel. When we say data architecture, we are essentially referring to the framework or the building blocks, in software and hardware that enables businesses to drive business processes, business decision making in a data-driven manner. Right? So what is that framework? What are those pieces you need to make your business data-driven? And when we say data architecture, there are a few common blocks that are part of any data-driven organization or data-driven process. There is a data ingestion layer, because you need to have ways to collect data from variety of sources. So data ingestion is one key component of the architecture. And alongside the data ingestion layer sits your data storage layer, right? Because you may be pulling data from various other sources, but locally you would want to have some data storage so that you can enable querying, you can enable historical, your applications to look at historical data and so on. So you need some local data storage solution. And then you have your data processing pipeline, what we also call as ETL pipeline or ELT pipeline, depending on whether you do extract, transform, load, or extract, load, transform. And then you have your actual intelligence, you have your analytics and learning, right? So that's the topmost layer. And then you expose the data via APIs, via UI, and so on. So you have that exposure layer. And then surrounding all of this, you have your data governance and data security. Right? That is where you do things like access control, RBAC. You make sure that you comply with whatever local compliance laws exist in that region, that country. Right? So essentially, when we say that data architecture, we are referring to this framework, this collection of pieces that enables businesses to be data-driven in all aspects.
Very interesting. And now how data quality plays a key component for a successful strategy. Maybe
I start off.
Yes.
I saw something.
Raj, maybe you would like to cover that?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Why don't you start? Yeah.
Yeah, data quality is absolutely critical to all of this, and Samir had a slide on that in his keynote. In the case of any data-driven processes, we know it's a case of garbage in, garbage out, right? In fact, garbage in, garbage out is one of the better cases. The worst case is garbage in, catastrophe out. And we have seen so many examples of it. Just last few months, I have seen several cases where, for example, you'd have seen in airlines, you'd have transatlantic flights, US to Europe, or in fact, last month I saw a case with Qantas Airlines. There were business class or actually first class tickets from US to Australia available for a few $1,000s. Typically, they are upwards of $20,000. Right? And why did it happen? Because of a data quality issue that powers the dynamic pricing algorithms. Right?
Wow, that's impactful.
That is impactful, and this is where I've seen like maybe tens of cases of such airline price errors. And this is in fact still only affecting business. There are cases where, there's this famous story from the late 90s where the Mars orbiter lander crashed. Why did that happen? Because there was a unit conversion error. There was one system that was talking imperial units. The other system was talking the metric system, using the metrics system. And that led to an error. Right? So data quality is absolutely critical, right? And in the industry over the last few years has started to define objectively what data quality means. If you go and do a Google search, or many of you who already work in this space would know something known as data quality dimensions. So the industry is defining various data quality dimensions. Again, there's no industry standard definition yet. So depending on who you talk to, they may say there are 5 dimensions, 6 dimensions, there are 10 dimensions. But I'll call out maybe 4 or 5 dimensions, which I think are absolutely critical. And they are accuracy. These are data quality dimensions. Accuracy, completeness, consistency, timeliness, and validity. Right? If you need a mnemonic for remembering this, I call it active. ACC. A for accuracy, C and C for completeness and consistency, timeliness, TI, V for validity, active. These are the 5 most critical data quality dimensions. But like I said, there are a few other dimensions that are also being defined. I expect that maybe in a year or two, somebody like a Gartner or another body will kind of come. Or maybe you will do that.
No. I believe not. So from the perspective of the telecom operators, right? How was that, right? How the data, the real world, right?
Right.
When you have to deal with that large amount that Samir just shared, right? In terms of data. How do you guys deal with that?
Well, I think the architecture, covered it well, and I would just kind of, put it in terms of from the logical aspect to kind of the as an operator, how we build it out. We have to kind of do a lot of classification and labeling of data. That is becoming more and more important. A lot of it is driven by the use cases itself. And that actually helps with some of the qualitative issues. From a actual streaming pipeline perspective, we're kind of relying heavily on Kafka-based approaches. And because of the structure of our business, we are kind of a hybrid. The network data going into the cloud. And going to the cloud, a lot of it is the data lake setup we have, and then as you noted, a lot of it is you need an analytics platform, a platform to kind of do your ontologies, to kind of ensure reusability and consistency. We operate as a feature store to kind of reuse the same modules, and that way we can kind of ensure some of that correctness and address the variability. So it does require a lot of discipline. So I'll just say that, and it's not we don't take it for granted, and it is something that does require constant due diligence.
Okay. Good. So what about you? I mean, you guys have a very different implementation, right? Especially on the RAN, in the core, right? Would you add something?
Yeah, I think sort of resonate with a lot of things what Raj said. We, in terms of a streaming, it's all Kafka, Prometheus based. All of that is generally relevant for all of us. But I think the way, we are on different life cycles, where we are versus where a large operator is, we do it the other way, right? We are outcome driven. We want to see what is needed to be done, and based on that, classify our data. And that might be multi-classification requirements, but that's how we see that we can quickly get to where we have to. But of course, the quality is absolutely important. There is a lot of noise. I think technology vendors themselves have to start thinking about what they put out as KPIs and counters. They absolutely have to. There is so much junk that comes in which is inoperable today, right? So we have to, as end users, as CSPs, we have to figure a lot of things out for the vendors, because I don't think they are partaking the solution towards an end goal that we have to deploy it for. So from our perspective, on the data side, it's essentially, we figure out what the outcome is, and then based on that, we reverse engineer our classifications and how to utilize it, what to prioritize, what to leave out. Right? There's so much data that doesn't have to come out of the edge at all, which we haul it in, and pay money to our cloud service providers. All right.
Yeah.
Please.
I do want to cap it out though. From telco, we're all used to deterministic outcomes and accuracy, high quality. But ask yourself the question. For most of the domains, like analyzing CDRs, not CDRs, like call records, customer call records, do you really need to get it to a high level of accuracy? The cost of doing nothing, of delaying, is actually going to be worse. To your point on those fares, Qantas came out and publicly said the savings were much more than the $500,000 they lost on those 20 people. But why would you delay it just for data quality? So just something to think about.
Very, very good point. So now changing a little bit of subjects, right? And maybe starting with you, Samir, right? How do you envision AI transforming these network operations and the way you deploy services and manage everything in the telecom industry over the 5 years from now, right? I saw a very nice picture that you painted as a cloud provider. So what is the vision that you guys have for the future?
So network operations is something we're investing heavily in at this point. The first, in the fundamental underlying principle is this: we need to democratize what has historically been an esoteric area so that almost anyone with a working knowledge can actually diagnose a network. I'm not saying act on the network. That is a completely different area with a lot of dependencies. But again, to go back to my talk, why can't a customer service agent today who's getting a call saying that my Wi-Fi is out or my coverage has gone down recently be able to ask that question in natural language and be able to get that from all the observability metrics that you have, and also look at a root cause analysis that they can send to a more qualified engineer who doesn't actually have to go through this whole process again. So that's where we're starting on the observability side. But the intent is to get to that closed loop with a human monitoring it for the foreseeable future.
How about you, Rick?
Yeah, I think network operations is one of those areas that is one of the lowest hanging fruits for the technological advancement that is happening with AI and Gen AI. So last year, in fact, Gartner defined a term called AI networking, which is essentially taking what we understand as AI ops, which is more for IT operations, and extending it to networking operations. Right? So the term AI networking essentially refers to AI ops for networking, and it laid down a framework for what are the problems AI networking must solve. Right? And it's all the same things that we have been talking about. So nothing groundbreaking in the definition, but just kind of putting a structure and a formal definition around it. Essentially the same things as how do we proactively do anomaly detection? Once we do an anomaly detection, how do we do an impact analysis? Right? How do we analyze the blast radius, the impact radius? How do we trigger a root cause analysis? How do we do root cause analysis? And ultimately, how do we move towards self-remediation? I think all of these aspects of network operations are ripe for innovation with the technological advancements that we are seeing with Gen AI.
Yeah, I'm going to make it interesting. I'm going to challenge that.
Please. I was going to.
Okay, well, okay.
That's important.
I'm going to beat you to it.
We become an echo chamber.
Yeah, no. It's kind of the term you use. You said the low-hanging fruit is the network operations center. So I can tell you that that was 20 years ago. Okay, maybe 30 years ago, because that was the first place where you had operational homogeneity, where you brought everything together, you drove discipline, and you now. You don't really have those multi-tiers. I mean, you have really collapsed the layers. That's where you have the massive automation already. And it wasn't done 3 years ago. So when you go there to look for fruit, there's nothing low. It's pretty high, and it's very, very complex problems that are solved there, especially with new technology introduction, what we call technology insertion, where all your, SA core flows are coming in, a new very complex service, a new arrangement of interconnection with different carriers. That's what those teams. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't an AI function need there or innovation there. There's a lot of work done, but it is not low-hanging fruit. For large operators, for us to get return on investment, it is a function of what we refer to internally as P times Q, which is a cost times how many times you do that task a day. So that's where we kind of focus on to say, hey, where would we invest to get the cost out of the business? And most of that for an operator like AT&T and a lot of the large incumbents is in the field operations. So where there are repeated tasks done. And that's where we want to bring simplification. We want to bring in the co-pilots. That's where the return is. So I'm not challenging the broad idea. I'm just challenging, the view that where the low hanging fruit is.
But let me ask you that, Raj. In 5 years from now, okay, today you have this complexity. In 5 years from now, what is your vision for that?
At the knock level,
No.
I'll give you on both. And I think Samir was talking about friends at SKT, and I've talked to people at KT and others in Europe as well. And to some extent, some of the problems are very similar. So let me talk to you about where things are the human scale, which is in field operations, where you are actually going in to diagnose a fault like PIM at a cell site, or you are going out to diagnose where a fiber cut is, or installation at a customer level. The challenge we have is to get experienced subject matter experts is very hard. And it's a huge workforce, and you don't have consistency because of the human scale. So if you can take kind of processes and apply kind of co-pilots and kind of the robotic process automation capabilities, that's, I think, does not require that, whether someone has 10 years experience or 3 years experience, you kind of get a homogeneity with that co-pilot. So that's a big opportunity. We also have an aging workforce. Demographics in a lot of places are against us for some types of work. I mean, there's legacy networks we maintain. At the NOC, for the complexity, a lot of those I think we want to kind of address with digital twin models, where we can query those complex questions in advance. I think I'll take an exception on something that Samir took and said as well about deterministic outcomes in models. It's true that most telco models, parametric models, operate with regression to say, okay, we got this high R squared, we'll go put in these deterministic outcomes, and those are the very common ones. However, we deal with a lot of non-deterministic scenarios. A few weeks ago, we had 2 hurricanes hitting Florida, within a week. Massive. And we had multiple weather models predicting where it would go, and we were trying to forecast where we would lose power, commercial power, and go do that. To be able to model that, know which network assets are in harm's way, determine where we need to send our cells on wheels with the satellite backup, where to deploy the resources. Those are non-deterministic problems. We've got to literally do simulations to go event-driven simulations to kind of go determine that based on a lot of historical data, but also some predictive properties. So it's a combination of those two, and AI does play a big opportunity there. But the digital twin, applying kind of the synthetic data injection and coming up with scenarios that human scale you won't be able to come up with, is I think where the opportunity is. But it is in the high end of the complexity domain. So.
Thank you.
But I should have sat there.
Would you add?
But
Would you add it?
yeah, well, so I think one thing in terms of your first fundamental question, that in 5 years, I think the most important thing I think should be achieved as part of this growth in AI is the implicit evolution of the workforce. Like I said, we are in a very different stage, right? We don't have like 25,000 employees. But then what we have to see how they can keep evolving with what's happening in the network. And even for a network like ours, we've been making so many changes. We've been doing open heart surgery in our network for a lot of the improvements that we expect to see that happen in terms of customer experience for that. So I think that is important, and that's where things like digital twins and all of that that Raj spoke is going to be super key, because it sort of dummifies the variations, right? Everybody can use the same natural language, intent-based questions to understand how does this packet go from A to B, and that is all you should be needing to know, right? And then you sort of bring it all to a very thin layer of experts that you can get the resolution done, right? And then in terms of deterministic and non-deterministic, I agree. On the CDS side, you really don't have to, right? But then the vendors who are trying to build these LLMs and stuff, the way they are approaching, they want to boil the ocean, right? I think in 5 years, you should have a short language model based, disaggregated, clear outcome driven AI agents available for us to solve for. And then we can solve about, bringing it all together in governance and stuff. Because today, I'm not seeing the value of what's out there to help me today, right? And they're delaying it. Delaying, I don't know for what, but I do not see that value to be put in place. Like Raj said, right? All those low-hanging fruits are gone. We do with a lot of efficiency when it comes to shift-based work resources that we have. Right, I can't say the numbers out, but it'll be very surprising one-to-one when I share these numbers, right? So we are already achieving those efficiencies. So what I want to see is how is it going to move the needle for me?
Yeah, I mean, the business is that we are in is pretty unforgiving, and it's financial driven, very cost sensitive. I mean, I think a lot of people in the telecom for decades know that. The days of the monopolies and are long gone, 4 decades ago. And as a result, the efficiencies are just enforced as a result of the financials. So.
Very good point. Let me bring that up a little bit. I remember like between 2019, 2021, Orange in Europe, they started their network or autonomous network implementation. And they share publicly some lessons learned in one of these events, right? The global CTO, he was talking about how they managed to do that across several opcos, because they present in many countries. And you both touched upon the human resource, right? And this is super important. So if you have to look into what are the skills that you would require, right, for the next few years, 3 years, 5 years, right? What is that you're looking in terms of reskilling the workforce? Would you like to?
Yeah. See, from my perspective, many people use the word NOC analyst and things like that. Those are the days that are gone from my perspective. There is no more analyst and NOC. We're all talking about sharp subject matter engineers to be there in the front. We got to make sure that the problem is resolved at the first touch.
But they also need, sorry to interrupt, but they also need to understand about modeling, right? About
they shouldn't have to.
Okay.
The guys who are subject matter experts, to me, should not have to understand AI or how the model is working.
Okay.
That's where I strongly believe the co-pilot twin the model is the way to go forward. Right? Wherein I'm constantly getting up. How am I beating the learning curve is with the co-pilots and the twin that is sitting next to me. And I'm getting better every time I utilize it, and I'm making the good decisions there. But it has to be sharp resources in the front, and you reduce the mean time to isolate and resolve. Right? That's how I would like the workforce to evolve.
Got it.
Right.
What about you?
So I think I actually agree with Sumu's view, because I think the layers of distinct roles has gone away. I think to some degree, software understanding of data is literacy. So you hire somebody, they are able to do some degree of programming and understanding data models. I mean, I think that is basic skills coming in. And the rest of it is really to have expertise at the engineering domain. I think that's the kind of the key piece. In terms of, and I'll kind of tee up what the Orange CTO had talked about, and kind of the journey of autonomous networks. And we benchmarked where our automation is internally, and we did for the mobility network, and this was required by my boss, who was very interested in kind of looking at it from the TM forum, autonomous network scoring. And we scored somewhere in the 2 to 3 range. Okay,
which is the average today, right?
Yeah, I think scoring it itself is a whole challenging domain, and it's self-graded right now to a large extent. And I think, we are aspirational to kind of try to get to 3 to 4, and just to kind of translate that, that's where you have more closed loop, and you have, injection of, more AI. To be able to do that, I think we really rely on our, operational partners who are in the front lines. And to what Sumo was saying, and I think, what Sinan talked about in the earlier panel, to get those use cases about what the front lines is seeing and translating that into, how you want to automate is the only way to going forward. It has to be completely made democratic to kind of, drive this capability to the end, or else you're not going to, have the impact. I think gone are the days of centralized implementation. That has to be done bottom up to kind of get a true, mega trend.
Fascinating. And from the labor, the workforce perspective, what the industry, right, the ONNs and the cloud, what is your recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, they have already spoken well about how the workforce would be upskilling. I'll just give a personal example about how I am upskilling myself. Right. So over the last few months, I have gotten into this habit of kind of thinking back at where I'm spending my time in a day, right? And really asking myself, could I have done that thing in a faster way or a better way, right? And there are a couple of concrete changes that I have made in how I work on a day-to-day basis. I'll just give a couple of examples. So I read a lot of research papers, right? Because I just want to be up to date with everything that is happening out there at the cutting edge. Earlier, the way I would read a research paper is I would, of course, download the paper if I'm reading on a laptop or if I print it out. And I have a way of reading papers. I'll start with the abstract. I'll quickly do a quick read of the whole paper. And then if I find it interesting, I'll go deep into specific sections. Nowadays, the way I read papers is I just upload them to Notebook-LM. If you have not used Notebook-LM from Google, I highly recommend to use it. The way it summarizes any document, be it research papers, be it white papers, blog articles, and the way it is able to extract key insights and summarize it for you, it's mind-blowing. Right? The first time I saw that in action, I was mind-blown. Right? And I've in fact sent a few examples to the original authors of the papers, and they have been mind-blown by how well Notebook-LM has done in terms of extracting the key insights, the way it creates analogy. Right? Even the original authors are surprised at how well it does that. Right? So today when I read papers, let's say I have to read 10 papers, I would first ask Notebook-LM to summarize that for me. And yes, there will be that 1 or 2 paper which I would want to go back and read in depth. But most of the papers that I just want to understand at a high level, I just let Notebook-LM summarize that. It creates an audio summary so I can hear it while I'm driving. Right? The second thing that I'm doing a lot of, I write a lot of code for my work or for my hobby projects. I have stopped writing code. I have realized I don't need to write code because these LLMs are already so good at producing code. So most of the time, either I use Cursor, where I can generate code right within my IDE, or sometimes I just come directly to a Gemini or Meta AI and give it a problem, and it generates a code snippet that I directly copy paste into my source file. It works, right? So these are 2 concrete ways in which I have made myself more productive in how I operate on a day-to-day basis. So now you expand that to the broader workforce. If everyone could become productive in these simpler ways, right? Imagine how more productive the workforce would be.
Cool. Samir, would you like to add something?
I've actually got nothing to add because
Okay, so let me give you this one. Let's shift gear a little bit. We'll start with you, right? So in your view, what are the most promising use cases for AI machine learning for telecom architectures, right? And you can talk, you're free to talk about any of the domains.
I think I spent 20 minutes talking about that, Claudio. So
You did.
So
Would you like to bring something specific that you think, okay, these are the next use cases?
I don't want to predict use cases because, like I said, we've gone through 1,900 POCs. And the category is customer service, obviously. Right. Yeah. That's not earth-shattering news to anybody here. What I will say though is risk score what you're trying to apply AI to. And for 90% of those use cases, what we found is the cost of inaction right now is way more than the cost of getting something wrong. There are 10% where you want to test the crap out of it and get a lot of data. But 90% of them get started. Like I said, he said, right? You can create that app. I create apps and I haven't coded for 20 years to do some of this stuff. There is nothing holding you back for 90%.
And let me turn to Raj, right? But do you see the same reality?
On the time to market?
Yes.
We do in a different aspect, and it is one that operators have been chasing, and it is a monetization of our network exposure or APIs. So, we were, working through as operators do, to standardize. We used to kind of work in Camara. We work in TM Forum. We work in MEF, multiple, and those are slow processes, right? I mean, they take many years. So, we kind of try to flip the model, and we try to kind of just say, let's do an accelerator program where we will, basically open up certain broad categories and have the developers come directly, to us. And
I mean external developers.
Externally, a developer community. So the way we historically, if you think of how APIs got built, it were there were first-party APIs. We would build it direct to consumer or to business, and then we certainly had some wholesaler agreements, and then there were what we called kind of third-party ones where they were kind of contracted. But again, the scale was a lot slower. Now, this is not a novel idea what we did. In fact, it was Jeff Bezos' edict from 2006, I think, or whenever it was about, that, I think everything at Amazon, right? Was it 2012? Okay, I wasn't sure what year it was. Okay. But it was basically, just APIs, right? Everything. So we actually, thought it was, maybe 10 years later, but about time, we approached it the same way to basically translate everything we had into exposure layer into APIs and kind of working with external communities. So we took that step, and for us to move it beyond the human scale to machine scale, we kind of did it with a Gen AI approach. Kind of we call it Ask API. We just trained it, and you can go create the APIs you want. And we brought the third-party developers, and we've had an order of magnitude increase in the number of commercial attaches that we've been able to do over the incumbent model going to this. And I think we are excited about what else we can do here to kind of unlock this value. So completely resonate with what Samir and Tim noted.
Perfect. So would you like to give us your view?
So
mobile.
Yeah, so the question I'm trying to answer is, what is that use case? Right?
Or set of use cases.
Yeah, so to me, I think there is a almost perfect need for uncorrelatable KPIs to be intelligently analyzed and anomaly detected and predicted. That, I think, is a needle-moving action. If that happens, it saves a lot of time for me on a day-to-day basis. Again, our life cycle is different in terms of how we are learning in the network, what changes happen on a day-to-day basis. We migrate customers from MVNOs and other operators to us. We learn something new and different every day. And, things like that. And I think these are things doable, but I don't know why we are not able to do it. Conceptually, I think, changes happening in one domain versus other domain. These are typically not correlated. Usually we do vertical correlations. Want it to be uncorrelated KPIs that can be brought together, analytics provide and say what's changing for us, right? And I think that's where the models have to become more telco aware than RAN aware and core aware and network aware. They got to understand the deployment constructs. They have to start understanding the configuration management databases, how they are deployed, the enrichments around that, and then of course the 3GPP architecture or the way we deploy and stuff like that. So I think those things have to happen. But to me, that is the killer use case for me. I think it saves a lot of time when it comes to issues and stuff. Faults are simple. Parent-child correlations are already happening, right? That's all baby steps done. That's when the KPIs across different domains can be brought together and quickly said, here is your problem, right? It eliminates multiple mandates to me. I think that's one use case I'm actually driving as we speak to happen in our networks.
Okay, spot on. Thank you. Changing gears a little bit now, going to O-RAN. Right? You two have been embracing, these deployments, and would you mind telling the people who are watching here or remote a little bit for the layman, right? What is the RIC, the radio interface controller, and the benefits and challenges you see with that? Would you like to start, Raj?
So, I'll just say, we kind of first think of the RIC as the non-real-time RIC and then the near real-time RIC. And I think there's a different promise on each. I think, this is, again, in an area that, because of the kind of the time scale our industry moves at, it's been over 4 or 5 years that this activity has been both in our industry community and operators trialing with it. So first, I think on the controls. So as we kind of think about what we're moving from, where we were in closed ecosystems on LTE, and with our SON infrastructure moving to the RIC, it abstracts out a lot on the controls and the data set. So what you get from O1 and R1 interfaces, you have a much cleaner and simplified data model. And I think it addresses a lot of things we talked about previously about data quality, consisting the labeling, the classification, I think is inherently, if you want to, again, a faith-based system, trust it, it's expected to provide you that along with the controls. And then it actually drives a ability to bring in our apps much faster than we could in the prior model. So that's the promise. Okay, we are still in the path of realization to unlock it. We are certainly very optimistic, and the current data suggests that I think our faith is not misguided. I think there's, we're kind of seeing early evidence of opportunity. I think what was demonstrated by Aira earlier tells you that. I mean, and part of it is it keys off the data model in the SMO and the RIC is kind of essentially part of that. So I think that's the promise, and it's I think an exciting path forward. And I think there's some other aspects of bringing in core data as well, instead of kind of keeping domains separate. We are pretty excited about kind of driving core data into the same model, and what is referred to as NWDAF, and kind of working the EDRs and driving more of the AI promises together, especially. Not just managing experiences and KPIs at a cell site level, but to do it at a per UE level. Some of the activity we are doing, given that we have this mixed modality of users per cell site. Now you have fixed wireless, now you have mobile users, you have IoT, you have connected cars, and they have different policies that apply to them. To be able to manage that, I think at the fine grain, it's not going to be possible without a paradigm like a RIC and an ability to synthesize all this data down to customer level train it and apply the inferencing.
Perfect. Sumo, would you like to, I know that you in Boost and in Dish, you have been already testing and using this technology for a long time, right? Challenges that you know,
So one
can
is
share.
the like I said, the specifications themselves are super powerful, especially from a NWDAF and a rig perspective. And our focus is more at the cell site level. That's where we are trying to do more of this. But it's, to me, I think there needs to be a lot more maturity on the vendor space for us to be getting better with this, because the consistency of the technology operating at the edges is still growing in the ORAN space. There is not these leap of faiths that we can do in many of these cases. And that is one of the major reasons why we are trying to keep it to cell site level in terms of what we are seeing. So that's possibly the bigger challenge, right? The maturity on being able to deploy these use cases or the capability themselves with the vendors that we are operating with, because they are also learning, they are figuring it out. But the standardization and the specs are super powerful, definitely the way forward. That we are fully convinced about.
Shifting a little bit, we're talking a lot about AI, a lot about machine learning, generative AI, and training models. Right? And these large networks, they have a lot of distributed. It's very spread, right, across the country. So, and training these models, it requires a lot of energy, right? And also optimizing PUE, right? It's very important in order to lower the costs, right? Of operation, as you Raj said, is at the end of the day an equation, economic, right, answer. So, from your perspective, Samir, how do you see that problem solved?
So first you got to ask yourself the question, do you really need to train the model on your specific set of data? RAG works amazingly well. In a lot of use cases, I'd say 90% of it RAG will cover. And there are already telco-aware models available, in our case on Bedrock, but from also the other hyperscalers. So I would not, at this point, recommend a bottoms-up training of a model. Fine-tuning could be applicable in a few cases, but I would rely on RAG for most of the use cases today. That is cost-effective. That is enterprise-specific. And there is a lot of data protection built into RAG by design. Whereas if you do go with an LLM training, it's getting better, but the guardrails are not fully in place yet.
Okay. Is it fair to say that for this bottoms-up problem that you mentioned, be very selective on the use cases that you want to do that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. When you say bottoms-up selection,
Yes. You said you shouldn't do all the use cases and train them right from the bottoms up.
well, we're talking about two very different things. You asked about LLMs, and I'm saying don't necessarily start with training LLMs. Use the off-the-shelf LLMs. Maybe you fine-tune it a little bit, but rely on RAG. Use cases, you got to test out a few LLMs against the metrics. And you will find where you need to augment the data, where you need to maybe de-bias the data, where you need to bring in new sources of data to complement your RAG, whatever. But I think those are very separate questions.
Very insightful answer. Rakesh, would you like to add?
And I completely agree with what Samir said. The only thing I would add to that is, in addition to thinking about models, the other thing to also carefully think about is your data pipeline. And it's very important to be mindful of the costs you're paying to maintain your data, store your data, move your data. There's a whole field called green software engineering, which is picking steam over the last few years, which advocates how you can be smart in the design of your data architecture so that you minimize unnecessary movement of data, right? Because it adds to costs, it adds to your carbon score, right? So that is the other thing to keep in mind, in addition to being mindful of whether you actually need to train your models, or is fine tuning enough, or in most cases, like Samir said, a RAG is enough.
Perfect. And I think your original question on the energy side, I think to what Samir also said, the RAG is certainly more efficient from a retrieval cost perspective, is an order of magnitude cheaper than running through a complete trained LLM. So I think the cost I've heard is 10x more. The part that I would tell you is that there are use cases where SLMs work better, and I would distinguish the comment about from a cost perspective, where that applies, and again, to kind of get to the PUE goals, I think there's a lot of optimization at the energy level that's possible, down to every server, every processor, your performance states and your idle states to go, make determinations. And I think for us, as we think of Cloud RAN, it's not just at the putting the network function to sleep or decide which carrier that we're going to put to sleep. The opportunity to take these shorter naps, or starting to figure out, could we just make adjustments on the P and C states, into deep sleep, hey, flushing the cache here, shutting the clock here, based on the workload type on that. I think those are opportunities that, AI is very naturally can be trained to do it by understanding the workload and the trends.
It's almost like the next step, right? The next evolution of these energy savings in the RAN.
Correct. Okay. And then you can kind of and the ability to kind of change states can be done in microseconds. So so some of the penalties that we had previously, where we did not have control down to the BIOS or processor level, is now available due to ORAN and kind of the cloud, native Cloud RAN controls that are exposed. So I think that's an opportunity for operators to be more efficient.
Okay, good.
So echo a lot of these things, but SLMs to me, like I said, right, in terms of the price and the ubiquity of the solution plus time to get something operational, I think to me, use case by use case, vertical by vertical SLMs are super critical. I think that's where I can see the AI rubber hitting the road much more faster, being more available for people to utilize on a day-to-day basis, right? Definitely, it's not going to the longer cycles of training the LLM or getting it just enough better. So right now, even for 100K, 200K investment, we were already talking about return for that in our worlds and stuff. So it's very difficult for me to spend time training and learning and figuring out if this accuracy is good enough or not, and then creating a cost model, right? From my perspective, it has to be SLMs and sort of an interconnected world of SLMs, which would help me.
Very good. And you should free. Yeah. Fantastic. Gentlemen, I think we are almost on the top of the hour. Like closing remarks, 2 minutes each. What do you like to say to this lovely audience?
I'll start. I think we need to see things in action soon. I need to start seeing more use cases. There's a lot of reliance on the CSPs to go figure the path out. And I think that should not be the case, in my opinion. The software vendors, the capability developers have to start thinking about this from what would benefit us. Of course, we'll be there to co-create or be there to add value and stuff. But most times what's happening is the R&D is being done with us. And there's enough there out in the world wherein people have to come up with a lot more semi-mature solutions, is what I would think should happen in this space. Because otherwise, with the pressures of cost that we have, these things will not see the light of day.
Very good. Raj?
Ditto.
Rakesh?
Now, I think my closing remark will be that for the first time, maybe in the last decade or so, I feel that the industry is finally starting to cut past the hype and start seeing some concrete ways of, making things real, right? Making things, business impactful. Yes, we are still kind of, close to the hype cycle, top of the hype cycle. So, there's still a lot of fluff out there. I still see a lot of VC money going into things that I personally, don't think will see the light of the day. But, like I said, just because of my own personal examples where I am actually starting to put these technologies into action and improve my own productivity, for the first time, I believe that we are now reaching that inflection point of making this real. It's very similar to, how, when internet came about, for example, there was a lot of hype for a long period of time before things started becoming real, started impacting masses, right? So I have that feeling now. So probably we are at the start of a very special phase, right, in our lifetime. So I'm really excited about how each of us can contribute to this process of taking these technologies which have vast potential, but building something real out of it, building something that is business kind of impactful.
I'm going to take Raj's time too. All right. So more on a personal note, I've probably worked with 2/3 of you in this room for the last 5 years. But I am leaving AWS at the end of this month to go to a company called Capita, where my boss at AWS is the CEO now. The intent is to agentify every single business process out there, including telco. So I'm super excited about actually putting it into action, the agentification of all the telco processes and the energy and utility processes and government processes that Capita serves today. So I will be moving to London to be the Chief AI and Product Officer for Capita. But the important thing for all of you cricket fans, is my apartment is 100 meters away from Lord's, which Lord's is the home of cricket. It's like Yankee Stadium for cricket.
There.
Exactly.
You take notes.
You guys are all welcome. Look me up. We'll have a drink. We'll go see a match at Lord's, and I'll buy the tickets. Absolutely. If any of you guys want to come over, happy to host you, and see you on the implementation side. Super.
And with that,
Congratulations.
we'd like to be back. Round of applause.
Thank you so much.